There is a moment coming for every soul, a moment no one escapes, a moment when time collapses into eternity. Saint Faustina wrote that this final hour is not quiet, not gentle, and not what most people imagine. It is the most decisive battlefield of your entire existence. Heaven and hell draw nearer than breath. Mercy stands at the door, and many souls, even those who lived outwardly religious lives, fail to recognize what Jesus is asking of them when it matters most. Jesus told Saint Faustina that the final hour reveals the truth of a soul more clearly than an entire lifetime. In that hour, excuses vanish, masks fall away, the prayers once spoken by habit no longer carry weight on their own. What remains is the heart, stripped of comfort, facing eternity with nothing to hide behind. Most Catholics believe that if they lived well enough, said the right prayers, or received the sacraments at the end, everything will simply fall into place. But St. Faustina's visions tell a far more sobering story. She saw souls who assumed they were safe, only to discover they had misunderstood what Jesus truly desired from them at the very end. What Jesus expects in that final hour is simple, yet so demanding that many refuse it even as eternity opens before them. And if you do not understand it now, you may not recognize it when that hour arrives. Saint Faustina did not speak from imagination or theory. She wrote what she saw, what she heard, and what Jesus himself revealed to her with grave seriousness. Her diary, which the Church later recognized as a profound testimony of divine mercy, contains scenes of death that unsettle even strong souls. Jesus allowed her to witness what happens when the final hour arrives, not to frighten the faithful, but to awaken them before it is too late. She saw bedsides where families prayed, candles burned, and priests had come and gone. From the outside, everything appeared correct. Yet in the spiritual realm, another drama was unfolding. Souls stood exposed before God, burdened not by a lack of prayers, but by a lack of understanding. They had relied on their past. They clung to memories of good deeds, sacrifices, and religious habits, assuming these would speak for them when words failed. Jesus explained to Faustina that the final hour is not about accounting achievements. It is not a balance sheet of merits. In that moment, the soul can no longer perform new works, repair old wounds, or distract itself with activity. Only one thing remains possible. The soul can either open itself completely to God or recoil in fear. Faustina recorded that some souls, even after lives of devotion, hesitated at this threshold. They believed they had already given enough. They did not realize that Jesus was asking for something deeper than effort, deeper than obedience, deeper even than suffering. And so the final hour became a moment of confusion instead of peace. Saint Faustina revealed that the final hour is not merely the closing scene of a human life, but the opening clash of a spiritual war. Jesus showed her that at the bedside of the dying, unseen forces gather. Mercy draws close with unimaginable tenderness, while fear, accusation, and despair press in from the shadows. The soul, weakened by pain and uncertainty, must choose how it will respond. Jesus told Faustina that many souls experience overwhelming regret in this hour, not only for sins committed, but for love withheld, for trust never given. The mind replays moments once ignored, and the heart trembles under the weight of what can no longer be changed. This is why the final hour is so dangerous. A soul that has lived without trust finds it nearly impossible to trust when everything familiar is being taken away. Faustina saw that demons do not always appear with terror. Often they come with quiet accusations. They remind the soul of failures, of broken promises, of prayers said without sincerity. Their goal is not always despair, but hesitation. A soul that hesitates cannot fully receive mercy. At the same time, Jesus stands closer than ever. He does not demand explanations. He does not list sins. He waits. He watches for a single movement of the heart. Faustina wrote that Jesus suffers most when a soul looks at him in the final hour and still holds back, not because mercy is insufficient, but because fear has been allowed to rule where trust should have lived. What St. Faustina witnessed next is perhaps the most disturbing truth Jesus revealed to her. In the final hour, many souls instinctively reach for the wrong things. They cling to what once gave them security, unaware that these supports no longer function at the edge of eternity. Jesus showed her that this is why so many souls remain restless, even when surrounded by prayers. Faustina saw souls presenting their past to God as if it were a shield. Years of service, sacrifices made for family, suffering endured, rosaries counted, confessions remembered. None of these were evil. All of them were good. But Jesus made it clear that in the final hour, these cannot replace what he is asking for now. They are fruits of love, not love itself. Some souls relied on their knowledge of the faith. They knew doctrine. They understood moral teaching. They had defended the church and corrected others. Yet when faced with death, knowledge offered no comfort. Understanding God is not the same as entrusting oneself to him. Faustina wrote that Jesus allowed her to see how intellect without surrender leaves a soul exposed. Others assume that receiving the sacraments alone would automatically bring peace. Jesus corrected this misunderstanding with great seriousness. The sacraments are fountains of grace, but they are not magic. A heart closed in fear cannot drink deeply from mercy, even when grace is offered abundantly. In the final hour, Jesus does not ask what you did. He asks who you are willing to be in that moment. Many souls, still grasping for control, realize too late that they have never learned how to let themselves fall completely into his hands. After revealing what does not save a soul in the final hour, Jesus slowly drew St. Faustina's attention to what he begins to seek as death approaches. Faustina wrote that this truth was not given all at once because the human heart resists it. Even holy souls struggle with it. It is simple in words, yet terrifying in practice. Jesus showed her that in the final hour the soul's posture matters more than its history. He looks for humility that no longer argues, for surrender that no longer negotiates. The soul must stop presenting reasons and begin offering itself. This is why the final hour exposes everything. A lifetime spent protecting oneself makes this surrender feel like annihilation. Faustina described souls who wanted to trust, yet could not. They feared losing themselves. They feared judgment. They feared that mercy had limits they might have crossed. Jesus grieved over these souls because their suffering came not from sin alone, but from never having learned how to rely entirely on him. In his conversations with Faustina, Jesus emphasized that trust is not an emotion. It is an act of the will made in darkness. At the final hour, feelings often vanish. Consolations are withdrawn. Even faith can feel distant. What remains is the choice to place oneself into God's hands without conditions. Faustina understood then why Jesus insisted that trust must be practiced during life. A soul cannot suddenly perform an act it has never learned. The final hour does not create trust. It reveals whether it was ever there. In this moment, Jesus finally revealed to St. Faustina what he expects above all else during the final hour of a soul's life. It is not fear, not self-defense, not even sorrow measured by intensity. He waits for one thing alone: complete trust in his divine mercy. Faustina wrote these words with trembling because she understood how absolute this request truly is. Jesus told her that at the hour of death, he comes not as judge first, but as Savior. His heart overflows with mercy beyond human comprehension, but mercy must be received. Trust is the hand that opens the door. Without it, even infinite mercy remains unused. This is why Jesus pleaded through Faustina for souls to trust him, especially in their final moments. Faustina recorded that Jesus promised extraordinary graces to dying souls who place their trust in him, even if their entire lives were marked by sin. In that final instant, one sincere act of trust can outweigh years of rebellion. This is not because justice is ignored, but because mercy triumphs when it is welcomed. Yet Jesus also revealed a painful truth. Some souls wounded by fear or pride refuse this trust. They want to understand before surrendering. They want assurance before abandoning control. In doing so, they close themselves at the very threshold of mercy. The final hour is not about proving worthiness. It is about allowing oneself to be loved without defense. Jesus waits for the soul to say, not with words, but with its entire being, "Jesus, I trust in you." St. Faustina understood that this revelation was both terrifying and filled with hope. Terrifying because it exposes how easily a soul can resist mercy, even at the very end. Hopeful, because it means no soul is ever beyond salvation while life remains. Jesus explained to her that the final hour magnifies what has been quietly forming within the heart for years. A soul that has practiced trust, even imperfectly, finds something familiar to cling to when everything else falls away. But a soul that has lived relying on self, control, or merit experiences trust as a threat. Faustina wrote that this is why the same mercy that saves one soul becomes unbearable to another. Mercy requires surrender, and surrender feels like loss to a heart trained to protect itself. Jesus revealed that many souls fear mercy more than judgment. Judgment feels structured, measurable, and fair by human standards. Mercy feels unpredictable, overwhelming, and humiliating. To accept mercy, the soul must admit it cannot save itself. This is why pride, even subtle spiritual pride, becomes so dangerous at the final hour. Faustina was shown that the greatest tragedy is not sin, but refusal. Jesus does not withdraw. He does not abandon. He remains present until the last breath. But he will not force trust upon a soul that will not open. This is the sobering freedom God respects. The final hour exposes whether a soul has learned to live as a child before God or has spent a lifetime standing at a distance. Eternity is not decided by surprise, but by direction. After witnessing these truths, St. Faustina realized that the final hour is prepared long before death arrives. Jesus made it clear to her that trust cannot be improvised in crisis. It must be cultivated quietly, repeatedly, in ordinary moments when fear seems manageable and surrender still feels possible. Jesus asked Faustina to tell the world that devotion to divine mercy is not merely a comfort for sinners, but a training of the soul. Each act of trust during life shapes the heart to recognize mercy when it stands before it. The soul that learns to say, "Jesus, I trust in you," in small sufferings, will know how to say it when everything is taken away. Faustina wrote that Jesus desires souls to reflect often on his mercy, especially when they fail, not to excuse sin, but to run toward him instead of hiding. This movement of the heart weakens fear and dismantles pride. It teaches the soul that safety is not found in perfection, but in surrender. She also understood the urgency of praying for the dying. Jesus revealed that prayers offered for souls in their final hour can strengthen their ability to trust. This is why Faustina devoted herself intensely to intercession, knowing that unseen battles are often decided by the prayers of others. The question Jesus leaves with every living soul is not whether death will come, but whether trust will be familiar when it does. St. Faustina's revelations bring the final hour into sharp focus, not to fill the soul with dread, but to strip away illusion. Jesus does not wait for the dying soul with a ledger in his hands. He waits with his heart open. The question of eternity is not whether mercy is available, but whether it will be received. Jesus promised Faustina that no soul who places its trust in his mercy at the final hour will be lost. This is his assurance, spoken with authority and sealed by his suffering. The smallest act of trust, offered sincerely in that moment, draws the soul into the ocean of his mercy. Nothing delights him more than a soul that dares to believe in his love when all evidence seems to disappear. This is why the present moment matters so deeply. Every act of trust now is a preparation for that final surrender. Every return to mercy after failure is a rehearsal for eternity. The final hour will not ask for explanations, defenses, or achievements. It will ask only whether the soul is willing to fall into God's hands without fear. St. Faustina wrote these truths so that no soul would be caught unprepared. The final hour will come. Mercy will be there. The only remaining question is whether the heart will recognize him and say, with its last strength, "Jesus, I trust in you.